Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Namaste, and a very good evening to you, wherever you're tuning in from, whether it's the UK, Australia, the USA, or India, or anywhere in the world where this beautiful community is spread out. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm really excited to be here and speak about a subject that I think all of us can relate to, and all of us have sometimes faced the challenge in this area. So let me start by introducing myself, and I would love to get to hear a little bit about your challenges along the way. My name is Prashant Katecha for full. I have the pleasure of being a servant of this wonderful community and communities around the world for many, many years. I am a well-being expert and conscious leadership expert. I've spent many, many years in corporate, working with organizations, businesses, as well as non-profit and spiritual organizations, where I have had the privilege of working with influencers, leaders, teachers, gurus, guides, all kinds of people across the world, and cultivating a whole bunch of skills in the area of well-being, wellness, mindset, and transformational skills and conscious leadership. And so it's a real privilege and an honor to be here with all of you today. And I found an organization called Stress to Success. You can check us out, stresstosuccess.co, and Urban Spirituality, where we have a 5-star rated podcast where we share lots of wisdom from experts from both business and professional and personal lives, bringing that wisdom to the public. So it's a real honor to be here. So namaste, Jai Sri Krishna to all of you. So we're going to get into this, and I want to talk about willpower. And what I want to start off by saying is this: where in your life has willpower caused you problems? Or where in your life right now, during this pandemic, during this lockdown that we've had, where is willpower causing you challenges in your life or in the lives of the people that you know? Perhaps it's somebody that you know, a family member, somebody who you've seen or who you are with, and they're suffering from any kind of addiction or health or habit or goal that they want to achieve, and it's because willpower is letting them down. For you, perhaps it's in your personal life. Perhaps it's your personal health and your fitness goals. Maybe you know that you need to exercise, you know that you need to work out, but you're not doing it as much as you could or as much as you should. Or maybe you started with a New Year's resolution back in January, and then we went into lockdown, and then your willpower, your desire to want to go and exercise has just gone out the window. Or maybe it's in your food choices. A lot of us suffer with addictions, whether it's food, cigarettes, sometimes even alcohol. And I think especially in a lot of communities, this is a taboo subject. To be able to openly say that I am struggling with, for example, an alcohol addiction, or I'm struggling with giving up smoking or certain types of food or certain types of drugs. It's interesting because many professionals rely on intoxicants like cigarettes, like alcohol, like drugs, like soft drugs, in order to cope with the pressures and the demands and the stresses that they're facing in their careers and businesses. And on the home life, so many people in a household may be having these sorts of attachments, and they know that it's not good for them. Or many of them realize that they want to give it up, but they can't because their willpower isn't helping them to do that. So think about in your life where it could be in your personal area, whether it's your food, whether it's your health, maybe it's with certain people. Maybe the challenge you have is your patience or your confidence levels with dealing with certain people or groups of people in the workplace or at home is limited. Maybe you don't have that. Your willpower isn't sufficiently strong to go up and stand on stage and make that talk. It's not sufficiently strong to be brave and assert yourself, be really assertive with the people that you keep saying yes to. Maybe you need to learn to say no better. You need to exercise your willpower. Maybe it's in your professional life. Maybe it's that you want to make a certain jump in your career. You want to reach a certain goal in your business, but your willpower is letting you down. Maybe you're not organized enough, or you know that you need to focus on 2 or 3 key things in your business or career, but each time you get distracted. Each time you get caught up in the small things. Have you had that feeling? Because I know I have. So many times in my life, I have had my willpower disappear, and then I've lost out on the things that I want to achieve in my life. So tell me if you can relate to that. Tell me if you've experienced this in your life. And I'm going to take a moment for you to do that. And while you're doing that, I'm going to go check in on seeing if there's any questions that are coming in right now as we're going through this. See, it's really important that part of the goal, part of our success is to start to recognize where our willpower is letting us down. A lot of times people don't want to admit that their willpower is letting them down. People feel scared to say that willpower is letting you down. People don't want to admit that they can't keep on top of it. And that's why mental health is such a growing challenge right now, because people are scared to raise their hand and say, I have a problem here. I'm suffering from some kind of mental health issue. And suffering from a lack of willpower can be classed as that, but we consider mental health to be a dirty word. We think if I've got mental health, I've got mental problems. Actually, most of us suffer from some sort of mental health disorder. We just don't label it that. So I think part of this journey, part of this dialogue that we're having right now online is to become more open and recognize that many of us have these things in our houses, in our homes, in our career, in our hearts. But opening up and speaking about it will give us the permission to be able to help one another more. So I hope that makes sense. And while we go through this, I want you to start to think about something that you have going on in your life. And we're going to start to look at 5 ways today. And I'm going to show you 5 ways that you can look at to start to take control and rebuild your willpower. Okay, so here we go. First things first, we've got to recognize a few facts on the table. Let's start with this. Firstly, let me start by saying this. There is a really beautiful verse in the Bhagavad Gita which talks about the power of the mind and how we need to exercise what we need to do. I really want to quote it here because it's so pertinent to building willpower, that we need to train our mind in a certain way. Otherwise, our mind controls us and we're not able to do that. And a fantastic verse in the Bhagavad Gita. For those of you who are not familiar with the Bhagavad Gita is an ancient 5,500-year-old Sanskrit absolute encyclopedia of life and personal management. It is incredible. And in that amazing book, in the world's oldest language, Sanskrit, Krishna says to Arjun, Chanchalahi mana Krishna, pramati balavatridam, tasyaham nigraham manye, vayoriva sudushkaram. So Krishna is explaining, he's the guru, he's the teacher to Arjun. And Krishna, as the Supreme, is describing to his student Arjun this powerful nature of the mind. Arjun is responding and saying, hey, Chanchalahi mana Krishna, the mind is chanchal, it is flickering, it is restless. Pramati balavatridam, tasyaham nigraham manye pramati balavatridam. He's saying the mind is so restless, so flickering, so transient, that I feel to control it is harder than controlling the wind. Vayoriva sudushkaram means it's harder to control than the wind. Who has that feeling, right? Who feels that their mind is sometimes so hard to control, whether it's in our work or in our personal lives or in our relationships? And so Krishna responds and he says, by practice and determination and repetition, you can gradually bring the mind under control. And so that starts with making distinctions, recognizing that we have choices, and then practicing the application of a better choice, and then being persistent and repeating that. And so that's what we're going to look at as we go into this. Now, one fact we got to keep in mind, and I want to use this great example. There was a study done with a bunch of students who were asked to sit in a room, and they were split into 2 groups. One group of students were given a bowl of radishes, and they were told, sit in this room for 15 minutes, don't eat those radishes. Well, they're radishes. They're not going to disappear anytime soon. The other group were put into a room for 15 minutes with a bunch of freshly baked, delicious hot chocolate brownies. And they were told, don't eat the chocolate brownies. Now, after 15 minutes, both groups were given a test to do, an assignment, an examination. Interestingly, the group that ate the radishes, the group that ate the brownies could only last for 8 minutes before they gave up on the assignment. Their concentration went after that. The group that ate the radishes, their concentration lasted for nearly 20 minutes. So the lesson here is that our willpower is like a cell phone battery. It's got limited capacity. We can build our willpower capacity. We can build that capacity, but it always drains. And so that's what happened to that first group. The group that had the chocolate brownies, their willpower was drained inside that room for 15 minutes when they were told don't eat them. Their willpower was really, really tested, and it just diminished. The other group were just given radishes. Well, hey, who cares about eating a ton of radishes, right? So their willpower wasn't challenged as much. And so the lesson here is that we've got to recognize that we're dealing with a finite resource. Willpower is exactly that. It will drain like a cell phone battery. And that's why we've got to learn to protect and preserve that willpower. We've got to protect ourselves from ourselves. And I'm going to go into that in our strategies. And that means discipline happens not in the discipline happens in the supermarket, not in the fridge. We've got to start with discipline over there in the supermarket, not in the fridge when we're really hungry and grabbing for something. So let's start with these 5 strategies. I want to go into it, and I'm going to keep an eye on questions that are coming in as well. The first strategy I want to talk about is not about willpower. It's about your why power. We've got to understand and build our why power. Not our willpower first, our why power. Our why power is more important than our willpower. Let me give you an example. Let me give you a great example of this. If I was to offer you $100 or £100 to walk across a 30-foot plank of wood on the ground, outside, would you do it? No conditions, just £100 to walk across a 30-foot plank of wood on the ground. Would you do it? Probably you would, right? Now, imagine if I placed that same 30-foot plank of wood in between 2 1,000-foot tall buildings, like the Petronas Towers in Malaysia. Imagine if I placed it right there, in between those 2 tall buildings, 1,000 foot up in the air. Would you walk across that for £100? Chances are you wouldn't, right? Why not? Why would you not do that? It's the same 30-foot plank of wood. Completely different risk, right? Your reason, your why has changed. Here it was fine. £100, you're going to get £100 for just walking across here. Your why is easy. You walk up across a 1,000-foot building and walk across 30 foot. Your why, it's not justified. Getting £100 to do that, the why has gone out the window. And so developing our why power first is so important to bolster and to preserve and protect our willpower. Getting clear on our why and why we need to accomplish a certain thing, a target, a goal, why we need to accomplish it, is going to help us to protect us and help us to stick to a good habit, or it's going to help us to succeed better in giving up a bad habit, whether it's a physical or a mental bad habit. We're going to have a greater chance of succeeding because we're not going to give up as easily if we've got a strong enough why to do it. The stronger our why is, the higher a chance that we're going to be able to succeed and make our willpower work for us, rather than our mind becoming a slave, like in the Bhagavad Gita verse, the mind becoming harder to control than the wind. Well, having a strong why will give us that strength, that anchor when we're tempted by things that we ought not to be, or when we want to give up something that we shouldn't have, or embrace something that we really want to aspire for. So start by re-inspecting your values and your goals. And that's my first tip. When you're looking at your why, evaluate your values and your goals associated with the habit, the behavior, or the goal that you wish to achieve and that you want to use your willpower to do. So whether it's losing weight, whether it's gaining weight, whether it's giving up a certain type of food or intoxicant or drinking, or whether it's going to the gym or exercising, or it's reading something or studying more, or making that advancement in your career by investing in a course and studying more right now during this lockdown. Strengthen your values and your goals around that, and you will strengthen your why power, and that'll set you on a good foundation to start to build your willpower. So got it? So I'm going to move on to the next one. Let's look at strategy number 2. Know your habit triggers. Now there are 3 types of triggers I want to talk about: your what, your why, and your who. There's a when as well, but let's cover these. First habit trigger is your what. What is the incident that is happening that is causing your willpower to be weak? So for example, when you hop on a train, or you've just finished work, or you've got home, when is it happening that your willpower is weakened? So when is it, for example, that you want to reach for a cigarette? When is it that you want to go and have a packet of crisps? Is it when you just wake up first thing in the morning and you just got to have a chocolate? Is it when you're sitting at home at night after you've had dinner and you're watching TV? And when you're sitting and watching TV, that's the trigger for you to go and have a bar of chocolate? Could it be that it's when you finish dinner that you want to light up a cigarette? Could it be that when you've finished your work, you want to go and have a beer with your friends? So identify the what. What is the incident that is causing you to want to go and indulge in the habit or behavior that you want to stop doing or reduce? That's the first trigger. The second trigger is your why. The emotion that's showing up. What emotion is showing up when you're doing this? So understanding why. What emotion is showing up? Is it anger? So are you being triggered? Is your willpower being tested when you're in a bad mood? When you're angry at something or someone? When you're frustrated? Or maybe when you feel bored? So maybe when you feel bored, you're indulging in a certain bad habit. Or maybe when you feel scared, you're going into a certain bad behavior that you ought not to do. You know, some of my clients have had a very difficult time in controlling it. They have an argument with their wife. They have an argument with their husband. And sometimes they'll just, before COVID, they would just go leave. They'd slam the door, they'll go leave, and they go to the pub. They'll go to a bar. That emotional state of anger, frustration at their partner triggers them to want to go to a bar and just get drunk or to get sloshed. And I'm just using one example here, but I want you to just think in your own life, what emotion is associated with your willpower being tested that is causing you to indulge in a habit that you ought not to do, or a hobby or an incident that causes you trouble, and where your willpower is being tested. Then there's the who. It could be the company that you keep that is weakening your willpower. A great example is after work, right? How many of you do a Thursday night going for drinks with your work colleagues afterwards at Canary Wharf in London or wherever you are in the world? And before you know it, you've had one drink, you've had two. By the time you've done 3, 4, 5 drinks, and it's like 10 o'clock at night, and you've taken in a whole bunch of extra calories. You're not feeling so great, and you've got the hangover on Friday, right? And you wish you can work from home to work it off. So who, the company you're in, the company you keep, also affects your willpower. Maybe you're in the company of people who don't want to exercise, who don't really like to exercise, and therefore you don't feel like exercising. Does that make sense? So look to the triggers of your company as well, the who that might be weakening your willpower. All right, so once you've understood your triggers, so we've talked about 3 things so far. We've talked about 2 things so far. We've talked about your why power, understanding your why. We've talked about knowing your triggers, the what, the why, the who. Once you've got those in place, then we're going to talk about strategy 3. Strategy 3 goes back to what I said at the beginning. Resistance is kind of futile. So rather than fighting it, I want to invite you to swap it. So I'll say that again. Instead of fighting it, whatever it is that you want to, that's destroying your willpower, right? That's getting the better of you. Swap it over. So let me give you an example. One of my clients, she's in her 40s. She's a mom of 2. She's a busy executive. She works long hours, so she gets carers for her kids. And when she comes home and the kids are in bed, she loves to sit by the TV and catch up on Netflix and stuff. When she does that, she wants to take crisps and enjoy large quantities of crisps. Now, we were having a chat about this. She has weight management challenges and she wants to lose some weight. And we were going through some of the lifestyle choices. As a well-being consultant, I'm able to go and see, what they're doing. And it just came out that she's eating a large quantity of crisps. So I said to her, what is it that you enjoy about the crisps? Is it the flavor? What is it that you enjoy? Is it the taste of that particular brand of crisps? Is it like cheese and onion, ready salted? What is it? And she goes, once we drilled down, she goes, really, it's actually the crunchy sensation. That's kind of what it is. So I said, okay, well, how about switching that out for carrot sticks and a bit of hummus? So she tried it. Now, she didn't really like the carrot. So I said, okay, what about Ryvita? Something like cracker bread, so they're lower calorie. Rice cakes is a good example. And she goes, all right, let me try that. she tried it, and surprisingly, she started to get used. It took about 7 or 8 days, but she started to get used to the crunch that she got from rice cakes and Ryvita instead of having those calorie-laden crisps. So what she was able to do is rather than weakening her willpower, because her willpower is a limited supply, right? Like all of our willpowers are limited. Rather than weakening her willpower and using it all up, instead she just swapped it. So rather than fighting it and trying to resist it, she just swapped it. She goes, okay, fine. I know I have a desire for something crunchy. I'm just going to swap it. Instead of crisps, I'm going to have rice cakes and Ryvita. And suddenly her calorie consumption went down from here to here. And it started, along with exercise and other stuff, she started to lose weight and get healthier. So here's another example, my own example. I like sweet dishes. There's no doubt about it. I enjoy sweets, especially after dinner. So my favorite was like Green and Black's chocolates. These are 500 calorie chocolates, and I would have 2 or 3 slabs of these things, right? I was a sucker for it. I really loved it. But what I realized afterwards is it wasn't really the taste of the chocolate per se. I just kind of needed something sweet. So I started swapping it out for xylitol candy, which is a low-calorie candy made of something healthy, xylitol, that's really good for you. And I just started out swapping it out for xylitol sweets and candy. Now, I didn't get the chocolatey bite taste, but I got enough of a sweet sensation in my mouth that I felt satisfied. So can you imagine that I went from eating this much chocolate every week, which I enjoy, and I'm not making anybody bad for having chocolate, of course, right? Enjoy chocolate, of course. But it's about the quantity of chocolate and the amount that we indulge that usually causes the damage, right? So I was able to scale back on my love of chocolate by switching it out 70% of the time for xylitol candy. And that tiny little sweet fix was done. Here's another great example, Coca-Cola. So I know somebody who has a client of mine in Australia. He loves Coke. And he's taking way too much Coke. His teeth are being damaged. He's loading up on the calories. He enjoys a beer as well. And he's just enjoying all of these things at night after work, right? Stressful guy. He's an executive. Now, interestingly, when we dissected what was going on, I said, what's the real thing here? He says, well, I love it. I said, so what is it that you really like about it? And he says, it's really the sparkly taste in my mouth. So again, it was more of an oral fixation. We call it an oral fixation around the sparkly, bubbly taste rather than that sensation rather than the pure taste of the beer. So I said, how about we swap it out for just sparkling, low-calorie sparkling drink, for example. So it's all right, we'll give it a try. Now in the first few days, it says, hey, this is not beer, it's not Coke. I don't like it. I said, hang with it for 7 or 8 days because the taste buds take a little while to rewire and recalibrate to the new taste in their mouth. Then they slowly get used to it. 8 days later, he says, I'm actually quite used to it now. He's given up Coca-Cola. He doesn't drink beer now at night. He's found that the sparkling taste of the flavored, sparkling, sweetened water is good enough for him. So I want you to think about what in your life you could use as a substitute for something that's less good for you. And the same thing goes for TV. Maybe you're watching a lot of TV. You need to watch a lot of TV, or you need to switch off by watching TV. Instead of watching certain things that are not really conducive to your personal growth, maybe you could switch off and watch something, switch it. So instead of not watching TV at all, switch the programming, change it up to something that's educational, inspirational. The same thing we do with music. For me personally, I love music. I'm a musician, so I'm a great fan of music. But I realized I was addicted to listening to music almost all the time, in the gym, on the road, everywhere. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. But I thought, could I benefit myself more by doing something more than just listening to music all the time? And my willpower was weak. I just couldn't help but listening to music. So I switched it out and I thought, you know what, during my time at the gym, I'm going to start listening to podcasts and audio episodes of something that I'm going to learn. And now I've switched it out. So I've still got my audio sensation of listening to something with my earphones while I'm doing my workout or walking. But instead of listening to music all the time, I've switched it with a podcast, something that's going to empower my mind, educate me, enlighten me. Of course, you can check out our podcast, Urban Spirituality, which is an incredible podcast that I run on iTunes, on Spotify, and you will learn so much from that. That's why I started it. I wanted to share this kind of wisdom with everybody and bring guests around the world. Jay Lakhani, Jay Rao, so many people who some of you may know been on the show. And so it's about switching out something for something else. So start to think about what you can swap out in your life for a different taste, a higher taste, and be patient. Allow the 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 days for your mind and your senses to become slowly used and recalibrated to the new sensation. and then your willpower won't be wasted. You won't have to use so much willpower. It will gradually move from a conscious effort to a unconscious, easy route. Does that make sense? We want to move from conscious hard work and willpower effort to an unconscious thing where it's just happening unconsciously, as easy as we're driving a car. Well, nowadays we can drive a car and talk and eat and drink and open food and do our makeup, some of us. So we've learned to do that because we're so used to driving a car, and that's what we want to do. We want to get to a position where that new habit becomes so easy that it's subconsciously done. We don't have to worry about it. Okay, so that was tip number 3. Let's move on to tip number 4. Tip number 4, strategy number 4, is going to be about leveraging laziness. Leveraging laziness. Now, before we get into that, let me just check if there's any questions going on. Namaste, folks. Great to have you guys all tuned in. Great to have everybody tuned in. Let me see if there's any questions coming in here. Really good to have everyone here right now. So good to have everyone here. Okay, great. No questions coming in. So let me just press straight on here. So let's talk about strategy number 4. Strategy number 4 is leveraging laziness. So this goes back to what I said before. As human beings, we're generally our minds are kind of lazy. We prefer inertia. We are creatures inclined towards what's called homeostasis. We don't want to make a change. We don't want to hang around and do something that forces us out of our comfort zone. We want to stay within our comfort zone. It's very natural for us to want to stay within that comfort zone. Does that make sense? We all want to be that way. Nobody wants to go beyond their comfort zone easily. We may want to, but it's hard. The body and the mind doesn't want to do that. And this is